Hi, I'm Nini, and welcome to Creative Angles, the podcast for creatives by creatives. Join us as we talk to people active in the ever-expanding world of the arts in an effort to both inform and inspire. And we're rolling! Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of Creative Angles. I'm your host, Nini, and today we're here with Cole. Cole, welcome to the podcast.
Hello. Happy to be here.
I'm glad. What kind of title would you give yourself right now in terms of your creative role?
It's interesting. I do have a creative background in game design and writing, but my focus mostly now is more logistical. It's more business focused. So my title at the company is Head of Business Development and Operations. But that just means I wear a lot of hats, none of which actually include putting content or anything directly into the video game. I do everything for the company that help so that ConcernedApe can focus on game development.
Right. Equally important, I would say.
Yeah, it kind of just keeps all the little stuff off of him so he can be the creative force behind Stardew and his next project.
Right. Is it something you expected to do ever? Like if you were looking back, like, I don't know, 5 or 10 years ago?
No. I was always drawn to writing and game design, and I sort of over time realized that what I really enjoyed doing is kind of facilitating the whole process. And, if there's multiple people on the team, keeping them connected and aligned, it's fun for me because it is making the game, but it's kind of enabling other people to make the game.
Right.
And just kind of guiding and helping and assisting. There's just like a lot of logistical things that need to be done. And so I can focus on that and do a good job with that. And then the game is better for it.
Right. I mean, yeah, that makes sense. Can you name something like that people should think of when they think of this kind of function or role?
I think it's just about organization and communication. So making sure everyone understands what it is that they need to do and is aware of what other people are doing.
Right.
And then just sort of keeping track of everything and making sure stuff is not forgotten, which I just do my best with a whole bunch of lists and whiteboards and, to try to keep it all. Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, just because there's so many pieces and there's all these little tiny things and it's easy to forget them. And, when creatives are trying to focus, I think it's very detrimental to their creative process if they're worried about stuff slipping through the cracks.
Right. I can imagine a lot of people, when they start out, they do have to do all those things themselves. Is there something you would recommend to people to stay organized, maybe?
I don't know if I'm the best person to ask about it. I mean, I've gotten good at it, but I've not always. Well, I kind of have a simple method that I've come to, which is what I used to do. Anytime I needed to do a task, I would just break it down into all the pieces. And sometimes that means putting them on sticky notes or, index cards or just making a really big list. But if, for example, let's say you're creating a game or a project and you're putting all of the things you need to do on little tiny cards and putting them on a table, and then the table like overflows, I would say you're probably taking on too much. And, and you need to look at the scope of a thing or just work on trying to visualize it and break it down into something manageable. And I think organization is the same. It's like if you're having trouble organizing something, it's probably like just too beyond your personal scope. And you need to focus and prioritize a bit better.
Right. Do you notice people take a lot on their plate? Because I feel like when people enjoy the things that they do, they're much more likely to want to do a lot of things, not knowing that that can also, lead to the same kind of burnout you would get from something you don't like. So do you like see that often?
I think it's just really common to underestimate the scope of a thing,
Yeah.
like how complicated it is to make something seemingly simple.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you just typically see that when there's a little less experience, um, because the experienced person, they'll say, "Oh, you're trying to make this. I know exactly all the pieces that go into that and how long it's
Right.
going to take." And but all of us are inexperienced in some way about some things. And the only way to learn is to jump in. And when you jump in, you go, "Oh, wow, there's so much more to this than I thought." Uh, and that's just the learning process. And I think being patient with yourself, understanding failure happens, you are
Mm-hmm.
going to bite off more than you can chew, and that's okay. You just take a step back and say, what can I actually accomplish?
Right. Let me just go back just a tiny bit. But how long have you been making stuff for?
Uh, I think since I was very little, I
Oh.
always liked to create art projects, or I was building games when I was really little.
Oh.
Um, I just, I don't know. I always be like, "Ooh, I have this idea, and let's see if it works." And normally it doesn't. But even even if it did kind of work, it was. Um I have a vivid memory of making basically some version of Risk, but it
Oh.
was like a fantasy board game with we bought a bunch of little wooden buttons and
Oh my
knobs that
god.
became all the pieces. We drew maps, and I just remember it being so much fun to come up with the rules and roll the dice and see it all
Oh hell
work.
yeah.
And yeah, it was really exhilarating. And probably if I went back in time, the game would be not that impressive, but it was fun for us. It was like, wow,
Yeah.
we're making a game about dwarves and dragons, and
Oh
and
hell
um,
yeah.
just kind of chasing that excitement,
Exactly.
and experimenting.
Right. So your love started with like very much like the physical games area?
I would say so.
Right.
I think I was always fascinated by video games and board games and card games,
Hmm.
but board and card was more accessible. I felt
Yeah.
like just with some dice and some paper, you can make a game and start playing it like right away. Um, so I was always drawn to that experience,
Right.
I feel.
Did you have any like big favorites back then?
In the very beginning, I think Hero Quest was really
Hmm.
intriguing to me with the little furniture and the miniatures.
Right.
I never played D&D until more recently,
Oh.
but I was fascinated with the idea of storytelling, tabletop stories,
Right.
um, and gameplay. Magic was pretty
Mm.
foundational. I remember when I first was exposed to Magic and being taught like, oh, you tap the cards, and I was like, wait, you turn the cards and that matters? Like it was such a foreign concept,
Right.
and but now I'm just immersed in this world of like board games, card games. I don't play as much as I'd like to, but I really love working on them, and I love it when I can play them.
Right. Where do you even start when you like make a concept for something like that?
I typically start at the experience that I want to create.
Right.
So the example I use is most recently. I'm trying to think of the last board game prototype I was kicking around. One that comes to mind was one that was like an adventure game, sort of
Ooh.
evoking the sensation of you are Indiana Jones or a character like that, traveling around the world, finding temples and artifacts and
Ooh.
staving off hazards. Um, and so I start with the emotion. I'm like, I want you to feel this emotion. Um, Now, what are the mechanics that support that? That's
Right.
kind of the next step, and
Cool.
that's very tricky. But
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I can
that's how I.
imagine.
That's what guides my design.
Right. Does it take super long to go from like the rough concept to something playable, essentially?
Um, Not typically.
Oh.
I A lot of times, what I'll do is just take a couple pieces of paper and I'll start doodling. Like, here's what the board could look like, or here's,
Ah,
um, okay, what are the decks of cards that I need? And then I actually kind of draw a little deck of cards. Like, these are the events, these are the hazards. And then when I'm done with that, it's almost like I have a little picture of what the board game could look like on the table.
oh yeah, yeah.
And then I kind of go from there. It's like, okay, well, if I have a hazard deck, let's generate like 10 hazards, and then I'll have enough to at least try it and see if it works. That's typically where I start.
Right. That sounds pretty smart. Cause like I have the Stardew Valley board game personally, but I hadn't played in a
Mm,
while. So my boyfriend is very into board games, so he he delved into the guidebook and everything. And honestly,
nice.
I was pretty baffled by how many layers the game has.
Mm,
Right? If you're not experienced with like board games whatsoever, and then you see
mm.
how much thought goes into something like that, is that something that goes through like a lot of rounds before you end up with such a layered kind of project?
Yes, I would say just a lot of play testing,
Right.
and the results of the play testing are you're throwing out entire concepts or chunks of content, or you're sort of tuning them through many passes and saying, "Oh, these cards don't feel quite right. Why don't they feel right?"
Mm,
Or, or I have an idea for something new that could be really fun, and that may change, affect other things.
right.
Um, so it is a very iterative, I would say, process.
Right. Is it hard to work with something that someone else made, you would say? Like an IP like that?
It really depends on the IP.
Hmm.
I think it's a great starting off point. Um, when I kind of the opportunity to work on the Stardew Valley board game sort of came to me, and you know, a mutual friend introduced me and said, "Hey, maybe you could make a board game." And I looked at Stardew and I was like, "This has all the makings of a great board game." It's visually, it looks, like you're looking down at a board. There's all these great things you engage with. There's
Right.
so much fun content. And so for me, it was almost like somebody handed me all the framework, and then I just had to pick and choose what made the best experience.
Right.
Um, but sometimes it can be very limiting. Like there's some IPs where just the concept of what makes them great is very difficult to translate into board game format.
Mm.
And um, and then in that case, it's maybe easier, quote unquote, to start with a creative, unique idea from um, your own brain, instead of working with their stuff.
Right. That makes sense. Is it like harder to make a board game than it is like a card game, or are they just completely different in their own league?
Um, Typically, I would say card games, just component wise, it's a bit simpler,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm not sure. I would say they are equally difficult to do well because they just the board. I was thinking a lot about this. What is it that the board introduces that the card game doesn't have?
Mm-hmm.
And mostly, it's just this sense of space. Like I have a space in front of me.
Right.
Things can be close together or far apart, or things can be tracked with tokens, or they kind of have this like location.
Yeah.
And card games typically are more abstract, like your spaceship is in space or on a planet, or
Mm-hmm.
whatever it is. But the card games, there's so many ways in which cards can interact or have different information on them or different combinations of information that it can be really challenging to build an elegant system that's not confusing and overwhelming, but
Right.
fits together and makes for a fun experience.
I feel like board games are also just, especially with younger people, they have such an imaginative aspect to them. Because it's like the weird traffic mat, that everyone used to have for some reason as a
Yes.
child. But like a
Yeah.
smaller version of it. It's like there's this really cute game. I'm trying to remember the name of it. It's like little dragons and they have like little shops and stuff. And it's like a giant
Mm.
mat that you roll out. I forgot the name
Ooh.
of it, but
So-
immediately it's like a very atmosphere invoking
Mm-hmm.
experience, I feel like, compared to card games. How many have you
Yes.
done in total, like made?
The ones that I've published, three. Gubs was the first one that I made, um, sort of like a childhood game that
Oh,
evolved into something special.
cool.
I'm trying to reprint that one right now, so I'm doing new
Oh,
artwork for it and getting it formatted. And
sweet.
then the next one was called Web of Spies. That was Kickstarter. I just really wanted to capture
Oh.
like the James Bond fly around the world, capture assets and fight off enemy spies.
Mm-hmm.
And then the third one was Stardew, working with Eric.
Oh,
Uh,
dang.
to Yeah, we worked really closely together. So it was kind of me pitching him ideas and presenting things, and then he would nudge me in the right direction. And we just kept doing that for 2 years to
Oh,
get
wow.
where it was. Yeah.
Lengthy process. I mean, makes sense, of course, but.
It took us about a year to land on what ended up being the final game,
Oh, really?
and then another year of polishing that, and then the production and all the artwork and
Oh,
everything.
wow. Does it add like a pressure, you would say? Because, like, obviously these kinds of IPs have a lot of people behind them that, have a very special attachment to the IP in some way. Did you, like, keep that
Yes,
in mind a lot?
I did. I mean, I just tried to stay very focused on what I felt the game needed to be. And
Right.
he told me something that's really stuck with me. I was asking him in the beginning, who is this game for? Who's our target audience, as they
Mm-hmm.
say? And he said, let's not worry about that. Let's just make a game we really like to play, and then maybe other people will like to play it too.
Right. That's
And I
great
thought
advice,
that
yeah.
was such good advice because if I like playing it, there's bound to
Mm-hmm.
be other people like me that go, oh, this is kind of cool. And you cannot please everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Some people have said they really don't enjoy the board game and doesn't meet their expectations.
Right.
But a significant amount of people have said they really enjoy the core of it, and they're enjoying the same thing that I also enjoy when I play it. So I felt like that advice was just really incredible.
Yeah. I mean, I've heard the same thing being said by a musician in this case to make
Mm,
things that you like the sound of. I feel like it's a very nice thing to apply to pretty much every art type that there is, right? To make something that you love first and foremost.
absolutely. But as artists and creators, we often fall into this trap of we read a lot of reviews and we're trying to
Yeah.
train and study ourselves and study what we like and what works. And we feel like we want to make something that other people like. That's the part of what we're trying to do. And
Mm-hmm.
so we spend all of this mental energy chasing that and trying to what would these people like? Would they like this? They like, but it's I think it's a bit of a diversion, or it's a distraction from,
Yeah.
if you can just find the voice inside of you that says this is cool or this is not really that cool, and follow that. I think that's your best bet.
Mm-hmm. That sounds about right. Uh,
Yeah,
Little backtrack question once more, but what did
sure.
you study before this, if at all?
In school, I studied English and creative writing,
Oh.
and I just always wanted to be a writer.
Hmm.
And I continue to write stuff. I do want to publish something. Nothing has really. I've written drafts of things, but I haven't gotten anything published yet.
Okay.
But that was what I studied in school.
Do you still like keep it on the side now that you're busy with other things as like a hobby or something?
Occasionally, like uh, recently, I would say maybe a year ago, I finished a draft of like an entire novel
Oh,
that
wow.
I felt really good about, but I think it's very well written, but I think structurally it has problems where
Hmm.
it's not entirely satisfying and not accomplishing what I want. And so kind of kicked it to the back burner as like, okay, I'll go back to it and fix it up when I have time, but I'm
Right.
focused on other things.
Is it hard to have a project like that doesn't like see the light of day just yet?
Um, I think it's just really common. I feel like I have a
Mm-hmm.
lot of things that I've made that I got to the end of a big push and I went, this is better, than what it was, but it's not quite there yet, and I don't know what to do with it. And so I kind of just shelve it with the intention of coming back to it when it feels correct,
Right. Was
or
it
that when the
always
timing
like,
feels right.
because I can imagine some people have things they really want to share of the world, but they also kind of know that it's not great, so they keep it behind bars a little
Mm.
bit. Is that like something that was hard at the beginning, maybe?
Um, I think, I was just talking about this with somebody that it is really important to get to a phase or a stage where you feel comfortable sharing stuff that you know is not ready.
Right, 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 right.
And part of that is finding the audience to do that. Because if you just send it to everybody, you are going to get some not useful feedback.
Yeah, conflicting stuff.
Um, and also, you're going to get some discouragement
Mm-hmm.
because there's people that are going to review your stuff and say, oh, this is terrible. And maybe there's not the right audience for it.
Yeah.
Um, I think it is frustrating a little bit when you want to give something your attention and you don't have time or energy.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I think that's just about like prioritizing your capacity and really making decisions about your life. Like, what do you want to invest your energy in? Um, like, for example, I have two little kids right now, and
Mm.
so I end up investing a lot of my energy in them. And I kind of just have to be like, that's what I'm choosing to do rather than work on this book. I'm going to put them to bed, and that's the choice you make. And you have to make it very consciously and then accept it and be happy with it.
Right. Did you have problems or did you struggle to do that like when you started out?
Yes, I think there was like a lot of like feelings of frustration or, oh, these ideas are going to slip away if I don't capture them now.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I I feel that less. It's not totally gone, but I've kind of, as I've gotten older, realize if the idea is good, you're going to come back to it. It's not going to
Yeah.
slip away.
Yeah.
And if you're finding it difficult to find motivation for something, then you kind of have to ask yourself, is this something that really matters to you? Because I think sometimes it's difficult to motivate yourself to do stuff that doesn't matter to you and you don't actually
Yeah.
want to do it. Um, I mean, it's just something I've come to realize.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Are there ever times where you like struggle with motivation for things that you kind of like have to do?
Oh yeah. I've definitely sat there looking at like a wall of, I don't know, emails or
Mm.
papers I needed to go through or forms. And I'm like, oh gosh, I don't know how
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I'm going to make myself do it. But I think part of my strategy for dealing with that is sort of accepting that I'm not always going to be on. I'm not always
Yeah.
going to be 100% capable of just go go go.
Mm-hmm.
You as a human being, you kind of fluctuate between the up and down, motivation and difficulty, and I don't know if you just kind of are like, hey, that's just how it is. Like some days I'm going to be really good, other days I'm going to be off. Um, it takes the pressure away, and I think
Yeah.
taking that pressure away means you can actually motivate yourself and respond quicker.
Right. I definitely feel pushing yourself constantly is one of the prime ways to get burnout. So that's
Exactly.
not ideal.
Exactly. I heard this thing that said, the Enterprise can travel at like warp 10 or whatever. I'm blanking on the max speed, but it doesn't travel at that speed all the time because if it did, it would explode. It travels mostly at warp 3 or 4, and then it only pushes it when it has to. And that's
Right.
kind of how we should think of ourselves, I think.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good analogy. Uh, are there any similarities that you notice between? Because I imagine it's very different to make something like a physical game compared to like a digital one. But are there like surprising similarities you've noticed over the years?
Um, I really haven't done enough like hands-on video game design
Right.
uh, to, I mean, I've been involved in video game and like primarily mobile game design for a lot of my
Mm.
career. Um, the the structuring of it, at least from my point of view, can be very similar. You're imagining the experience, you're imagining all the components of that experience, you're trying to map it out so that you can scope it and build it. Now, that's just my approach.
Right.
Sometimes people sit down more organically. Like I think when Concerned Ape was building it, I don't think he had this big map of here's the whole game. I think he just sort of started with one thing and kind of went on to the next logical things and kept doing that
Right.
until it filled out into this game. Um, with regards to video game versus board game, um, I think very quickly the process becomes different. With a video game, you're testing things, but you're kind of stuck. At least for me, I've seen folks stuck in this phase of like actually making it do the thing you need it to
Right.
do, like building and debugging this
Mm-hmm.
complicated lump of code, maybe. Uh, Whereas with a board game, it's more. It's not like you have to figure out, how to draw a card. You can always draw a card. You can always roll dice. Like there's not so much debugging
Yeah.
as there is figuring out what it should be and is it fun and
Mm-hmm.
is it working as a physical uh, thing that you can interact with.
Your little you don't suddenly clip through the board, so to speak, compared to
Yes,
like a video
exactly.
game.
Yeah, to me, video game design is like, you have a vision and you're building it, but part of the challenge is just making it do what you're telling it to do
Yeah,
properly.
exactly.
And that's very difficult, sometimes. And then also the technology can change, and that can
Mm-hmm.
change some of the variables from behind the scenes and introduce new problems. Whereas, the deck of cards is always going to work exactly the same. It's just what do I choose to put on them?
Yeah, exactly. Which is you have like reruns of certain games where they slightly change things, but it's
Yes. Yeah.
obviously not running on like different source code or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
If someone has like an idea for a physical game, like where would they even go to make it a real thing?
Um, if they have an idea, the best thing to do is to try to prototype the idea,
Mm-hmm.
and you just keep prototyping until and testing it. And every time you test it, you should be making changes to it. And you just keep repeating that process until you play it like 5 times in a row, and you're like, I don't want to change anything. This is, maybe I want to add artwork and all the fancy bits, but mechanically, the game works and is, you know, it seems to have settled. And at that point, and also when I'm playing with other people, they seem really engaged. They seem like they want to play again. If they say, "Hey, I want to play, let's play one more time." Boom, you've got something. And then at that point, you start investigating, okay, what does it take to actually make this into a real thing? And do I want to just do like a Kickstarter or something small? Do I want to try to find a publisher, which I feel like is very challenging
Right.
these days? Just because with board games and tabletop stuff, the margins are very slim,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of these companies have a lot of stuff they're already working on
Mm.
that they have a lot of confidence in. So for you to pitch a game out of nowhere, um, it's not impossible, but I just think it's very difficult.
Right. Do you notice like a decline of sorts with, the kind of move to the digital era right now?
Not really.
Oh,
I feel like there's been a surge of board games
oh hell yeah.
over the last year or two, and some creators like Tom Vassell is a guy who does a lot of reviews at I think they're called the Dice Tower, and they he was posting saying something like, it used to be you could play all the games that came out in a year, and now it's impossible. There's just so many games that come out, which is exciting because it means there's all these things for board gamers to explore.
Right.
But it also creates this ocean where you're like, wow, I can't even get to most of these things. And
Yeah.
I think it's possible in that surge that a lot of really good products get lost, and that's unfortunate.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I definitely feel like they offer a very unique experience nowadays, especially because some people I think feel a little distanced because of the online culture that's like evolving
Mm.
constantly, and then the
Mhm.
whole desire to sit around a table with your friends
Oh yes,
is
yes.
livelier than ever. I mean, I'm not an expert, but there's this little cute little board game store nearby that is
Hmm.
always popping off. It's absolutely
Yeah.
insane, and it's so full of you would think that there's copies of the same box in the shelf, but it's actually all completely different stuff. I don't know how they
Wow.
do it, but it
Yeah.
seems to do very, very well. Yeah. Do you notice any things evolving right now? Because of course a lot of people are very worried about AI, and I do happen to know someone that collects board games and says that if you bring some sort of board game with AI stuff involved, that you're not exactly welcomed most of the time. I don't know.
Yes.
Is that common? Is it happening a bunch?
Um, I mean, just the attitude towards AI, you mean?
Mm-hmm.
I do think there's a lot of folks that are like, this is very bad.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think there are definitely cases in which they are correct. I I don't know where it's all going,
Yeah.
because in some cases I'm like, some of these AI tools are interesting tools,
Mm-hmm.
like Chat GPT. If let's say I'm running a D&D game and I'm
Right.
like, hey, give me a list of 50 names of villagers that I can use in my story, and it just kind of gives me these things. Um, that feels very handy,
Mm-hmm.
but at the same time, I would never use it to name characters in a book I'm writing,
Yeah.
or uh, something I'm really investing in. I still think it needs the human touch more than ever right
Right.
now. And I think for kind of like mundane, passing sort of filler stuff,
Yeah.
AI can be a handy shortcut, but it really needs to be treated like a temporary shortcut,
Yeah. Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
not a full blown. Like when I see AI art, I'm like, that looks kind of cool, but also I'm not compelled to really look at it.
Yeah. It's a little off
Um,
or something. I don't know.
yeah, it just doesn't. When you see great art by humans, you go, wow, you can feel the person behind it,
Right.
and um, AI is kind of like a sausage machine. It just like grinds up everything and makes a sausage, and you're like, okay, it kind of tastes all right, but it's not, I don't want to eat this all the time.
Right.
Um, so that's kind of how I feel about it.
No, no, that makes sense. I mean, I would imagine like say someone is making a card game or something, and the cards have like a base with like a frame for an image or information
Hmm.
goes there. If you could somehow set some sort of AI thing up where it like fills information that you give it in the
Hmm.
right place in a template, something like that could be super useful. I imagine it's
Yeah.
to help the process, but not to replace it. I always feel
Yeah,
like.
I've actually done exactly that because I was working on a prototype for a game for a company that the whole idea was making like hundreds of cards for this game.
Oh.
And I built a system. I came up with kind of how it worked. And then I said, hey, give me 100 location names, give me 100, you know, enemy names. And I just kind of popped those in the same way that you would use like lorem ipsum when you're doing graphic design.
Right.
Um, and it's just filler because once we get to the place where it's like, okay, now let's actually make this into a real thing, then I would pull all those out. I would go through each card and really come up with some good ideas for myself and good names and good enemy lists. But until that point, it would be kind of unnecessary for me to like work really hard just to
Mm-hmm.
populate all this filler stuff.
Just kind of factory work kind of feeling sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, I've done it many times, but all it means is I take a long time,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe at the end of it, we have to throw away half of those enemies because
Yeah.
mechanically it doesn't work. Um, so it's almost like it can be wasted work at that stage of the prototyping.
Yeah, exactly. Then it sounds very, very handy in that sense. Is it
Yeah,
kind of a different question, but people around you, like in real life, like family or something, do they understand what you do?
sort of. I think my parents do now. For a long time, they were a little bit like, "What's your day to day like?" But now I can tell everybody like I'm handling all this miscellaneous business stuff and just kind of connecting the dots for other people,
Right.
and people tend to understand what that looks like from a from the perspective of a business.
Mm-hmm. Business terms are more familiar.
Yeah, but I will say I often tell people, they say, "Oh, what do you do?" And, "Oh, I work for this guy who made a video game." And if they haven't heard about the game, they have no idea what it is
Well, what game is
and
that?
why it's significant.
Yeah.
And I typically don't really make a big deal of it if that's the
No,
case. I'm
fair.
just, yeah, I work for this guy. He made a game. Um, but if people do know, they're like, "What?" Like, holy moly, they get very excited. And
Yeah.
um, because Eric has really built this world with this really passionate fan base.
Yeah, for sure. I assume they sense the. I mean, I don't know him obviously, but I assume they sense the like heart that was put into the game. I think that attracts a lot of people to the project itself. At least
You're
that's.
absolutely right. You're absolutely. I really think that's the case. Like he put a lot of love in it, and you feel it as you're playing.
Yeah, exactly.
Um, and kind of getting back to your last question about like the AI stuff, I just don't think you get that
Hmm.
any other way other than somebody sitting down and working really hard and putting themselves into whatever it is they're building.
Right. I mean, it sounds very similar to because I already spoke to another indie game dev, and it very much felt similar in the sense that they just kind of have, I want to make this, and it just kind of
Hmm.
start. Because
Yep.
it's also just
Yep.
so easy nowadays to start with a project like that compared to 10 years ago.
Oh, absolutely. There's all these tools, there's online resources. Yeah, starting is definitely the easiest part. And it's just sort of getting it, once you get in the middle or really it's get down to the end, that's the challenge, I think.
Right. Is there something you personally used to think about this field that you learned is very different now, a few years later?
Um, I guess before I was in it, I was always wondering, like who is making these things and how do they do
Mm.
it? And from the outside, you look at some things and you say, why did they choose to do it this way? Or why doesn't this have, I don't know, some functionality like multiplayer or something, right?
Right.
Um, and when you get in and you recognize just how much work it takes to do very simple things,
Mm-hmm.
and that there are a lot of limitations too, like, you know, sometimes people request features and they're like, "Oh, it seems really obvious this feature should be in the game,"
Yeah.
but there's like a technical limitation that we cannot
Yeah,
bypass because of
exactly.
consoles we're supporting or whatever, and it's
Mm-hmm.
not actually um, our choice for the game to be that way. It's that we have no choice. Um, that's probably one thing that I've come to know after seeing how it's done.
Right. Is it hard to? Because I imagine if someone starts off from complete scratch, there's a lot of space to do what they want to do. But if you already
Mhm.
have something people know a company or a person for, there's some sort of pressure, I think, to quote unquote deliver. I think. Do you notice that pressure personally, or is it more motivation than anything?
Um, I'm not sure if I totally understand the question.
Oh, it's like if you have like a bunch of quote unquote fans, right?
Hmm.
And they, they're a fan of your first project, of a first project, and then
Mm.
said company makes another project, and there's all these
Mm.
people that expect, kind of the same experience like that they had from the first project, or they have a lot of expectations in general. Is that like
Yes,
pressure? You think?
I think there is a lot of pressure there, and you know, Eric I think tries to work very hard to just stay true to the idea of let me just make a game and see how it goes, and I'll do my best and follow what I think is fun
Mm-hmm.
and what I've learned. But you do have to kind of remind yourself, I think, that there are a lot of people out there with expectations. But again, chasing those expectations is potentially a trap too.
Yeah.
It's like because if we can just continue to stay true to what we think inside is the best for whatever it is we're building, um, it's like that's what got us here in the first part. That's what made Stardew great. Um, that's why I think I'm happy with the board game. I just sort of kept following what I thought it needed to be.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's kind of reminds me of like when I'm watching like some kind of professional sport,
Hmm.
like golf comes to mind, where it's like, man, how can these people be so calm and like putt the ball while like a million people are watching them, you know? Um, but I think that becomes the game at that level. That's what they have to practice is like tuning it all out and just
Yeah.
focusing and not being so stressed out about it. Just playing to their best of their ability. It's part of how they play to the best of their ability.
Right. No, that makes sense. It's, like on YouTube or something, you'll see those kind of videos where they completely dissect every little hint and
Hmm.
taste of something that's on the way to
Hmm.
extreme detail. So I can totally imagine that that's a very unique experience for developers like that.
Yes. Yeah, I do remember seeing a video that was kind of making fun of this, that, um, anytime Eric is posting something, a lot of people are kind of jumping on it and they're excited about the next game. And the excitement is welcome. We're making games. This is supposed to be fun and exciting and neat. But I do think expectations uh, can kind of ruin a thing for you.
Yeah.
If you go into it being like, oh, it's gonna be like this but better, maybe it will be something different. And if you're not open to the experience, then you may be disappointed. It's hard to say.
Right. Do you expect to stay in this kind of corner of the creative world for a long time, or do you want to keep kind of growing into whatever comes your way?
I'm very happy with what I'm doing day to day. It's kind of a special place to be. It's a unique opportunity to work closely with somebody in this scenario. There's not a
Mm-hmm.
lot of indie games out there that are doing what Eric is doing,
Right.
and how he's doing it too. Our team's very small. It's for in terms of game development and game design, like, he is all of that
Yeah.
still and going into the next game. And I enjoy just working closely with him to facilitate that. Um, in the meantime, though, I do have projects that I'm working on personally,
Right.
that I hope, like, I would like to publish something like something written and bring my card game back and sort of work on more things going forward. But I'm taking it very slow. Like, most of my effort goes into doing a good job at work, and then the rest of it's family, and then a little bit of it is like creative projects.
Right. Is there, because right now I imagine people who are, say, still in school or kind of daydreaming about what they would want to do someday. I think there's a lot of vagueness, right? If you do like an art
Mm.
program, it's kind of like where the hell am I gonna end up someday? Kind of thoughts.
Yes.
Is there something you would like say to people very anxious about that kind of vagueness that comes with the industry?
I feel like I have a lot of sympathy for those
Mm-hmm.
folks they're creative, they're still growing and exploring what they like to do. They have so much potential. Uh, A lot of them have created already really amazing things, and they're going to throw themselves into the ring, looking for jobs or looking for these kinds of opportunities to support themselves. And in so many ways, the industry kind of is just brutal
Yeah.
to the delicate creatives.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it's unfortunate because I feel like it's really not their fault. But
Right.
it's hard not to take it personally when you're like, oh, I'm just an artist. I'm working on my art and nobody will hire me. And it's like it has nothing to do with your talent or potential and has so much to do with the environment
Mm-hmm.
and which you cannot control. So
Right.
I would tell a lot of those folks like keep doing what you're doing, find a way to, you know, hang on to that spark that got you there to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
And um there's a quote from Bruce Lee, be water, my friend. And I love it because it's like, he's like, water can be hard, water can be soft. It moves, it
Right.
takes forms. And
Flexible.
um, yeah, I'm getting a little philosophical, but
No, no, it's
I
fine.
I like that expression of like be flexible and be gentle with yourself and like go where it feels like you need to go
Right.
and um, and just be patient, but hardworking. And I think with humility, you can go really far.
Yeah. No, I think that's great advice, honestly. Well, last but not
Thanks.
least, is there anything or anyone that you would like to shout out?
Oh boy,
Could be yourself or a
I
project or
shout out myself. um, hmm. Um, I don't know. I mean, I'm very grateful to have the opportunities that I have right now, and I would say I really appreciate my wife and my kids for
oh,
helping and supporting and just being part of this adventure with me. and um, and yeah, I mean, my family in general, I really draw a lot from them. Like my brother and my parents, they've always been very supportive and engaged with
awesome.
me in this hobby as much as they can. And um, I think that's given me like a real foundation to kind of be like, okay, I got some people in my corner. I'm gonna go out and do some wacky stuff, And if it
Right.
doesn't work out, like I got people behind me, and that's very comforting.
Right. That sense of connection must be a good motivator, I can imagine.
Yeah, and I've always been a person where I'm like, hey, I made this thing. Look at this thing. Isn't this cool? Like, check it out, and they've always accommodated that and been like, oh, that's very nice. Or like my brother always gives me a lot of feedback. His name's Alex,
Awesome.
and helps me, and we play games together. And if they were not like that, I don't think I can do what I'm
Yeah.
doing.
So you would say that's very
So.
important to have in some degree, like that kind of support.
Yeah, I think so. I think especially if you're making games, game making is a communal, like it's about connection and about socializing and
Yeah.
and talking to other people. And so if you have people that you really enjoy, talking to, um, having conversations and telling stories with, that is just a great incubator for play.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I imagine some people, of course, find that in completely different places as well. But as
Yes.
long as you get motivated like that, that's a great thing.
Absolutely. Yep. Yeah. And I mean, often when I say family, I mean, close friends too can
Right,
become family
found
or
family.
pets, or, whatever it is, just feeling like, oh, I have somebody that kind of gets me and we can talk about our things that we're excited about with.
Right. Well,
Yeah.
listener, if you want to check out Cole's work, what he's done, the things he's worked on, there will be some links in the YouTube description down below. And well, Cole, thank you so much again for being on the podcast at all.
Yeah. Happy to. It's fun.
Well, listener, you know how it goes. Stay awesome, stay creative, and we'll see you next time.